I grew up with 5 sisters, and we all were creators of one kind or another. Nature to me is everything. I have a pretty easy life, and I just would like in my future to be able to continue to do this until I'm dead.
We all die one day, and
yes.
I wonder, why would you choose to use art as your last part of this journey of life?
It was therapy for me through a really difficult time for everyone. And my mother was passing, and she was very sick, and she was an artist, and she was always encouraging me to continue to paint and don't stop. In fact, she painted to the very end. She was legally blind. We were going through a really terrible time in this country, in this world, and I don't know how long that's going to happen, and it could happen for a long time. And so this is what I want to be doing until I can't anymore. You know, don't put it on the back burner until later. I'm Joanne Hickey. I'm a pastelist at Hatch Street Studios, and I have no formal training at all other than high school art classes with 2 wonderful art teachers, Becky Zara and Jean Hong, and my mother and my grandmother.
How would you describe your style?
Well, it's not a classic pastelist. Classic pastelists are usually kind of light-handed and airy, and I am a little more intense and detailed, and I love bright color. And pastels are pure pigment and come in so many beautiful colors that I just fell in love with their vibrancy and decided to use them to their fullest extent, and I don't go lightly with them. And my style is pretty much mixed. I do I'll try to do a little realism. I do some impressionism, some fantasy, and whatever floats my boat at the time.
Why would you choose to use realism as your main form of expression?
Well, it's not.
Or like depicting something that seems like real.
So my animal portraiture is probably the most realistic thing that I do, because when people commission you to paint a portrait of their pet, they mostly like it to look a lot like the pet. And so they give me a reference photo to work from, and I try to render that image to look as close to what they are expecting. And a lot of times what they are memorial paintings of a pet that passed away, or it's a gift to somebody of their pet, beloved pet, or the pet that passed away. And so I try to get that painting to look pretty close to the real animal, because that's what I'm asked to do.
Standing in your position, how would you view abstract art?
I love it. I think it's great. I don't practice it myself. I'm not, I've tried, but I don't think that people should have to try that like abstract art. I think that people that are naturals at abstract art, it just flows from them, and it just doesn't flow from me. I've tried doing it, and I find myself trying to detail it and not let it just flow. And that's what kind of abstract is the ability to be loose. And loose I am not with a paintbrush or with a pastel stick. I'm, at first I thought it was a flaw, that I was so detailed and rigid, but I've come to kind of embrace it as my style. I like to be more detailed, and I can't pull myself away from it. And I know it's an actual, a really good ability to be able to be loose like that. But I've embraced my tendency to be more defined and bold.
So in a comparison of, let's say, an abstract piece of painting and a realism piece of painting, which one would you define as more close to the standards of a good piece of art?
A good piece of art?
Yeah.
is any art that anyone does. A good piece of art is one that somebody sat down and took the time to put on paper or canvas or sculpt or write. That's good art. I don't think there's a good piece of art and a bad piece of art. I think that if somebody took the time and put themselves into it wholly, like, is an artist, and an artist is a good thing.
But some artists sell and some artists don't. And there is like some type of standard.
Right. But that depends on a good buyer and a bad buyer, not a good artist and a bad artist. That depends on what the buyer likes. So if the buyer prefers an abstract, then that's what they need to look at. If they prefer realism, that's what they need to look at. If they prefer fantasy or impressionism or whatever it is, that's up to a buyer. And I think that whether or not a person's art sells doesn't label them a good or a bad artist. I think it is dependent upon the market at the time and actually the location where you're living. Do you live in the city? Do you live in the country? What are people's tastes? What are people looking for? I think that art sells and it doesn't sell, and it goes through ebbs and flows of selling and not selling, and that depends upon, I think, what's going on in the world, the economy, and just society. I don't think it labels anybody.
What are some of the things or people that has influenced your creative process?
2 art teachers that I had in high school, Jean Hong and Becky Zora, were really influential. But mostly I would say that my mother and my grandmother, and watching them live and raise children and work the way they did and still create, brought me back to creating again. I mean, I grew up with 5 sisters, and we all were creators of one kind or another. We were all artistic, poets, crafters, painters, every one of us. And we got that from my mother and my grandmother. And that's what I would say I attribute mostly.
How are you influenced by the natural environment?
The natural environment is everything. I grew up on a farm and around animals, a lot of animals. I love being outdoors. I always loved being outdoors. And I love painting outdoors. I love plein air painting. I couldn't wait for the season change because, I missed it so much. And I'm looking forward to it. But nature to me is everything. It's my church, it's art, it's everything.
Do you do plein air paintings or do you only paint from photos?
I do plein air paintings, and I love doing it. This was a plein air painting from last fall with the Dartmouth Cultural Center. Plein air, it was called the Wet Paint Paidnarum, and there were many artists out all through South Dartmouth doing painting, and I've done it. This year will be my 5th year, and I sat at the Slocum's River and did this painting, and I love doing it. I've done others as well on my own time, but this was an actual competition. It was a lot of fun.
Do you think there is slight changes in your style when you paint from a picture and when you paint in plein air?
So when you're painting from a photograph, which I do often because I'm commissioned to, and when I'm painting out in the open air, it's completely different. It's more freeing, and it's actually more like an abstract. It's very impressionistic. Most times there are people who do realism outdoors, but especially if you have a time limit to do it during a competition, you paint what you see in the light and in the water, and it's very dependent upon what's going on around you. It's nothing's controlled. nothing's controlled. The temperature of where you're painting isn't controlled. Sometimes it's windy and crazy and or raining, and it changes your entire flow of how you're going to paint. And so you'll notice that some of my, well, actually that's the only plein air I have here. Oh no, that's another plein air over there. And they're not as intense. They're a little bit more of a flow to them, a little bit more impressionistic, which I really love. Impressionism is my favorite.
If you take a photography, it's depicting the actual scene, just like you're doing like a painting. So, like, why would a buyer choose to buy a painting compared to a photograph?
That's interesting. I've wondered that because I have actually had the open studio tours here and had some of my boyfriend's photography here, and his work sold and mine didn't. And so I was like, wait a minute. But I'm not sure of that. I know that it depends on, the buyer. Is the buyer looking for a painting or a photograph? You know, some people love a good image, true image of a photograph. And some people like the mystery in a painting and the effort. It's a different, I think it's the buyer. I don't think it's different art. It's a completely different art. So it's like comparing, you know, why does some art sell and why does some art not sell? It's hard to say. I think that it has to do with what the buyer wants, and it has to do with what's going on in the world, what they can afford. Right now, people aren't buying art as much. I was very lucky to sell a large piece recently, but I don't have a lot of commissions lined up, and typically I have at least 2 a month lined up. I do have in June my first live wedding painting coming up, and that's going to be exciting, and I've been prepping for that and doing some small studies of wedding gowns and floral arrangements and things like that to get ready. And you know, at first when the person asked me to do it, I turned it down because I hadn't done it before, and it's their wedding, and I didn't want them to be disappointed because I hadn't done it before. And she came back a week later and asked me again if I'd do it, and I thought about it a while, and I've done some plein air and I've done some portraiture, so why not merge the two and give it a shot? And if she was willing to be like my guinea pig and knew it was my first time, and I'm excited about it. And as it's getting closer, I'm more confident about my ability to do it. I think that it'll be fun. And it's a new and popular trend, so we'll see where that goes.
How do you sell your work?
I sell my work primarily through social media and word of mouth. I do not have a website. I do promote myself a lot on social media. You know, I show different works that I've done almost daily on Instagram and Facebook. I don't have any other social media accounts. But word of mouth has been very, very helpful for me.
What do you envision for your future?
I don't, I'm at an age where I'm not looking for a career. I'm retired.
Yes.
And I'm just, you know, I was so happy to find this place to work because I live in a very small, 1,000 square foot home. And this just it couldn't accommodate this. I hope that I always can make a little bit of money doing this, enough to pay my studio rent, my art supplies, but I'm comfortable. I have a pretty easy life, and I just would like in my future to be able to continue to do this and stay healthy enough to do this, and for the world to allow people to do things like this until I'm dead, until I'm gone. That's my future. It is a business. It's also pleasure, but it's not, it's just the journey through the rest of my life, I think. That's all. Just a peaceful place to paint.
We all die one day, and
yes.
I wonder, why would you choose to use art as your last part of this journey of life?
Well, so I've always loved art, and I've always dabbled in it. And during COVID, it was a very frightening time, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I found art again, and I specifically found pastels, which I fell in love with, and it kind of snowballed, and I couldn't stop. And what it did for me was, it was therapy for me through a really difficult time for everyone. And my mother was passing, and she was very sick, and she was an artist, and she was always encouraging me to continue to paint and don't stop. In fact, she painted to the very end. She was legally blind, and she continued to paint, very impressionistic, but she continued to paint right to the end. And I want to be able to do that. I want it because it is such good medicine. And it is soothing, and we're going through, this isn't a time where we're going through COVID and people are dying from that disease, but we're going through a really terrible time in this country, in this world, and I don't know how long that's going to happen, and it could happen for a long time. And so this is what I want to be doing until I can't anymore. And that's kind of what inspired me to continue, was watching my mother and wanting to do that too. And I have a lot of support. I have a lot of friends and family and my partner who encourage me. And it's just a really healthy and peaceful way to live. And why would you want to live any other way?
For young people, do you think it's worth living a life that we all end up dying one day?
For young people, my advice would be to do what makes you so happy for the rest of your life. I know that people have to work, and people have to have responsibilities, and they have young families. For young people, I know they have all of that, but I hope that, and I wish I had continued even when I was younger, but of course I raised my son and I put it all aside. If they just could keep in mind that they should nourish that part of their life too, forever and to the end, and that they won't be sorry. I mean, I'm not sorry that I didn't. I wish I had started a lot younger, seriously, in learning. I've learned from so many artists, and I don't think that whether it's art or whatever it is, as long as it is healthy and helpful and not hurtful to anyone, that whatever it is that makes you happy, you should continue to do to the end. And, I mean, that's pretty basic, but yeah, that's what I'd tell young people. Don't put it on the back burner until later. Keep doing it.